Hi, this is Michael Fitzgerald. I'm a contributing editor with MIT's Sloan Management Review, and we're here today to talk about digital transformation with George Westerman, who is a research scientist at MIT's Center for Digital Business. George, it's great to have you here with us today.
Thanks for having me here.
So why this study, and why now?
You know, it's interesting. We're hearing about huge changes coming about with social media and mobile technology and analytics and even embedded devices. And lots of hype there, lots of stories in the press. But unfortunately, the stories all tend to be the same kinds of companies. They're about Apple and Amazon and Google and some interesting companies doing fascinating things. But if you're the leader in a large multi-billion-dollar company, it can be really kind of hard to look at those and say, that's me. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to go out and we wanted to say, what's happening with technologies like this in big traditional companies? And we found some amazing things. So it's been a fascinating project.
How long have you been looking at these sorts of companies? I mean, in some ways, it would seem like everyone should be digitally transforming because we're all kind of riding this wave that's been going on for the last decade, 15 years even.
So it's interesting. There has been a lot of work going on in basic IT work to kind of get the backbone straight. And some companies are farther ahead than others. Yeah. But most of the executives we've talked about are trying to figure out how can we get more value out. So we now have a unified view of the company, but how are we using that to sell better? Or how are we using that to make our processes more efficient? And then, as they're still working on that, these new technology hit, and they're trying to figure out how do we think about those things too.
You talk about three kind of big areas for digital transformation. What are they?
So the sexy part about digital transformation is all the stuff you read about how people are working with their customers differently. But we're seeing amazing changes happen behind the scenes in how your processes are working. And the other thing that's very exciting is people are also changing their business models.
So you can transform your company, you can transform your customer experience, you can transform operations on the back end, and you can do that with or without changing your business model.
In fact, we're seeing the most valuable changes are when you connect those two together. To take the customer and the operations, put them together in a different way so you can face your customers different or face your suppliers more different in different ways, then you got some really amazing gains that come in.
So it seems like, is the real theme underlying your work that traditional businesses need to transform themselves on their own, or the force of technology and the market will basically do it for them in a really disruptive and potentially damaging way?
Well, think about the things that we've seen just in our lifetimes. There was the idea of PCs hitting a desktop. Really wild stuff. Nobody believed it would be all that useful, and it turned out we all do it. E-commerce, huge. Email, huge. Cellular phones. These things have just become part of what we do, and if you have not incorporated them into your company, then you have troubles. These new technologies are coming on are very similar. And the point is, if you can drive the change with it, you can get more advantage out of it than if you just let it drive you.
So let's talk about what are the elements of digital transformation. Are there specific elements that you've identified that are key to sort of digitally transforming in a traditional business?
Well, one thing we found is digital transformation is happening in every industry, from pharma to hotels and restaurants up to manufacturing. Every industry is seeing these technologies hit, and they're trying to do something with it. But for all the work that's going on, all the attention that's being paid, all the work that's being done, we're seeing very different results for what they're gaining. What are they doing? Some people are just investing in technology. They're doing really interesting stuff, fascinating, we all love it. Other people are saying this technology needs to fit into some way to drive value in the firm. They're putting a leadership framework on top. Those people are getting most of the value.
Talk about the technologies you've identified as transformative. Can you identify them and talk a bit about what they do?
So we went out looking at 4 different technologies that are really hitting the market at the same time. One is social media. So how are you using Facebook and Twitter to interact with your customers or to do it internally? Mobile, phones, tablets, smartphones. Analytics. There's a lot of data out there. How can you get more value out of the data that you have? And the last one is embedded devices, such as RFID tags or other ways of tracking items or people around. And we thought these 4 technologies are hitting all at the same time. And amazing things are happening from being able to put them together. So we wanted to see what was out there.
So I noticed that you don't talk about the cloud at all as one of your transformative technologies. Why is that?
The cloud is certainly out there, but we saw that as more of a step down below the scenes enabling this, as opposed to being about completely transforming the way your business works.
And are there specific areas where these technologies have an impact within a company?
They're definitely happening on the customer-facing side, and that's the sexy stuff we see all the time. So when you think about a company there's a Harrah's now has this really fascinating way of doing mobile marketing. If I opt into the process, I can check in on my phone, pick up my key at the bell captain rather than going to the front desk. I can start getting coupons for different things in the properties on my phone. And if I click on it, Harrah's knows within minutes what I like and what I don't like. They update their preferences about me. In addition, if I walk down the strip, enter another Harrah's facility, it knows me there and can pick me up at that point. So this is a great way to help me feel better about things, cement my relationship with them, and at the same time, they learn how to market to me better every step of the way.
Does it tell me how much money I've been winning at the Harrah's casinos as opposed to losing at somebody else's
You
casino?
win at the casinos? They know that.
Only when I'm using social media on my
Right.
phone at Harrah's.
Similarly, Nike has done some amazing thing around events and social media and their website to really cement their customers tighter to them around World Cup or around Olympics. As an event that's athletic, well, we happen to sell athletic apparel and athletic tools. So some people doing amazing things there on the front end.
So there's a natural kind of fit for customer experience and getting in touch with customers,
Right.
especially it sounds like for companies that market to consumers.
There's an interesting thing going on there, though. Let's say you're a B2B company. You might think, well, how can I use this? We're seeing a lot of examples of companies going from being a B2B business to being a B2B to C business, we're calling it. They're using these technologies to get closer to their customers.
I mean, the back end is traditionally where we look at technologies being transformative for companies. What are you seeing in operations?
So a lot of the back-end stuff has started to happen years ago with basic information technology, your ERP systems, these kinds of things in place. What we're seeing that the new technologies are allowing, one is tremendous amounts of global collaboration that couldn't happen before. People can work anytime, anywhere, any place, and they can work with other countries as easily as they can work with other cities because these technologies are in place. It's huge. And so that's been a big gain. The other thing, people also feel they're just smarter, that they're making decisions based on data where they used to have to make it on intuition. That actually can be a big culture change in companies, but the ones that can do it are benefiting there.
So are you seeing differences in the way that these companies are using technologies, transformative differences?
So certainly these technologies can be used in different ways by different companies. Many companies are doing what we call substitution. And all they're doing is replacing one technology with another. If your mobile phone is just an email device, that's substitution. If your Facebook page is just a copy of your web page, same thing. Then there's extension, where you're doing things that you normally would do a little bit better. So one pharma company has created a social media community to talk with physicians and say, how are you using these drugs? What kinds of things are you running into? They really can't do it effectively with customers because of regulation, but they can do it with doctors. So that's kind of neat. And then the other one we're seeing is transformation. Now these are a lot harder. This is where you get the big bang for the buck. This is where insurance companies are completely changing their underwriting process because they know so much more about customers. And they're then extending that to know not only whether you're a good risk, but with pretty good likelihood what you're willing to buy next. That's transformation. Or the Harrah's example where they're doing mobile marketing, and it's not just a website on a phone, but actually a tight way of linking me closer to them and everybody's happy about it. That's transformation. What we're seeing typically though is 80%, 80, 85% of companies are not doing the transformation yet. They're doing the simpler things. And whether or not you do the transformation is worth thinking about whether the transformation is possible, and then you can decide.
Does transformation mean that your business model is going to change, or will your business model stay the same?
Some people are jumping into brand new business models, launching new digital products. There's a mortgage company in France that has always been back-end B2B. They're launching a whole new way of merging you through the entire process of buying a home. They've never been in that space before, but they have the knowledge to do it. Other people are just transforming the way they work, just becoming one global company. Those kinds of things, clearly those are out there. But even if you transform a process itself, that has big benefits either for internal work or for external. So just for example, there's a mining company in Chile, Codelco, and they are doing some really interesting things with autonomous vehicles. You've heard about the Google car. They have basically the autonomous mining truck. And as they experiment with this and make it work, these trucks are the size of this room. And they can drive across a mine, and amazingly when they do it, they don't get into car accidents. You're also not running over people, which is kind of nice. But what they're doing is they're going beyond that then. It's cool that this truck can make it from one place to another on schedule without an accident. What does that mean about how the mining vehicles will work? Do we ever need to send anybody underground? Now, if the mining vehicles don't need to have people in them, maybe we build the mines differently. Maybe there's kinds of copper ore we can go after that we could never do before because we've transformed the way we go get it. That's that transformative thinking that you can keep building on what you're already doing.
So given what we've been talking about, I think it could be a good point for us now to talk about the issues that exist in companies that are trying to transform themselves. I suppose the traditional challenge with that is that you start competing with your partners in the process. How are they sidestepping that, or are they running into this issue?
Well, it's essentially because this is not the typical like e-commerce thing where you've got your store managers and and they're going to fight with each other. Companies have learned how to manage that, but it took some time. This is often by offering additional services or additional ways of communicating that don't necessarily cut those out. Volvo, for example, Volvo has always been a B2B company. They actually sell to dealers, not to customers. And the dealers own the customer. Now Volvo, with their ability to push to talk and talk to and the apps that go with that, Volvo's getting a direct link to their customers without taking the dealers out of the loop.
You've written a couple of well-regarded books on IT and management. You know, you have these IT departments. We're talking about technology and transformation. What do I do with my existing IT structure?
We found people trying to do this digital work and work around their IT departments. The problem is that all the digital knowledge you have, your processes, all these things, they're all enabled by IT, and they've been that way for years. If you go around those people, you lose all that knowledge. And so we're finding in the best companies, the companies that are making the most progress, they either have or they have built very strong relationships between their IT and their business people. And that involves a lot of conversation on both sides to make sure your understanding is the same. And sometimes some investment in IT to clean up some of the mess that's been there in the back for a while. Because what you can't do is, it's really hard to launch a global mobile initiative for customers around the world if you don't even have a single view of the customer inside your company. You got to get that IT right sometimes.
Yeah. So it does sort of behoove you to kind of work with what you have and not kind of throw it out,
Right.
and kind of try to reinvent it.
Yeah, and sometimes you bring in some additional skills. Sometimes you move people into some roles where you got the old and the new. But trying to work around your IT department as opposed to with them should be your last resort.
How hard is it for CEOs, in your experience, to really kind of get their minds around these technologies and make this push? I mean, it's not what the CEO is typically trained to do, right? So is this a challenge for them in your experience, or do they kind of recognize that they got to do it and they lead on?
So one of the things that amazed me interviewing 157 senior executives in 50 companies around the world is how much these people are really paying attention, but also how smart they are about saying, I don't need to be the expert in these spaces. I can hire the right experts. And so they as the CEO have set up the part of the vision, the impetus to make this happen. And then they've hired some smart people or promoted some smart people or rearranged some smart people to really drive this in the organization.
So they just kind of, so is there a wrong way for them to kind of approach this, or?
Yeah, there are two wrong ways to approach it. One is to say, just go off and do something, and we don't need to worry about coordination. Another is to hire a bunch of people and say, make this happen, I don't need to be involved.
A lot of CEOs especially are rather skeptical of technology, and some of these technologies they seem kind of frilly, and then some of them, like embedded technology, is really kind of in its infancy. I mean, how do you know when to adopt and when not to adopt when you're talking about things that are really still emergent technologies?
I don't think you ever know when to adopt, but what you want to do is try to be innovative about it. Try some experiments. Where could this be useful? Where could it not? And every time you do those experiments, you learn a little bit more and you gain opportunities. One of the things we found about having this transformative vision that you can govern and lead around is that the vision's not all that well fleshed out. The important thing here is that vision starts. As you make progress, you can add things to it.
In the report, you write about this idea of digital maturity. Can you tell us about what you mean by that?
So one of the things that we found for all the stuff that you're doing with digital, the people that are getting the most gains from digital transformation are the ones that are leading the change better. And so we look at it in terms of two dimensions. One is what we call digital intensity. How much digital stuff are you doing? The others we're calling digital leadership intensity. And that's how well are you driving the change? And so we're characterizing companies in terms of both of those dimensions. The best companies we're seeing out there driving this change are, we're calling them digerati. And our research is showing that they are able to drive change better, they're able to get better results out of it. They are not only investing in digital, but they're putting these leadership frameworks in place, the governance and the engagement and the vision.
Now, are these companies that are, is digital the same as sort of, I guess, IT expertise, or is it something different?
It builds on IT expertise, but it is something different because you're really changing. The best companies with their IT change the business with the technology they've got. A lot of other companies think of IT as something that sits in the back room. And this is really about changing your business process. It's not about doing a mobile app. It's about engaging differently with your customers with mobile. It's not about doing social media inside. It's about allowing your employees around the world to collaborate in ways they never did before. So while there's IT there, it's about changing the business too.
Okay, so there's digerati. What are the other kinds of companies that are out there that you've identified?
So if that is the top of a 2x2, the digerati, what about the rest of the people? There are many firms, especially in places like insurance and other places where they want to be very careful, that we call conservatives. They're putting all the leadership elements in place, the controls in place, but they've not yet engaged their company in moving forward digitally. And so they have an opportunity to say, now that we kind of know how to do this in the right way, how can we ramp things up? Then there's another one at the other axis, and that's the people investing a lot but really not leading it forward in terms of one vision, and that's what we call the fashionistas. And they are the people that you can imagine, they're spending a whole lot of money on looking really great, but there might not be a whole lot behind the scenes there. And so what they need to do is they need to think a little bit more about how can we start to link across these pieces. So one of the things we're seeing in many companies, for example, is companies that are in each business unit maybe doing some interesting things with digital. When they put them together into something that can work across the enterprise, that's when you start to get the benefit there.
And what's our fourth? We got
fourth.
digerati, fashionistas, we've got conservatives, and then
the beginners. And there's a real question in as fast as these technologies are moving, do you want to be the kind of company that's doing nothing on investing and nothing on thinking about how you might want to invest? There are a lot of companies in that world, but you want to think about whether you really want to be in that space or whether you want to be moving somewhere else.
And these are these companies with their heads in the sand, or they just haven't had a lot of reason yet to be using
It's a
digital
combination. Some people are just skeptical, and so they're just saying, we've been burned by these technology things before, we're not going to do it now. Others of people are saying, in my industry, I make specialty chemicals, or I do, very abstruse kind of financial services or whatever it is. We don't need to act first, so we're going to let other people make mistakes first. The real danger, though, is if you sit back and you just say, this is not for me, I don't need to think about it. Because you ought to be thinking about it and making a conscious choice if you're not doing anything.
How long is it taking companies to make these transformations of the people you've talked with?
So this is an important thing. You can wonder, if I'm in the pharma industry, do I really need to care about these technologies yet? If I'm in manufacturing, do I need to care about these consumer technologies yet? These kinds of things. What we're finding in every industry is there are some people we call digerati, some firms that are leaders in this. And if the change takes 2-3 years to make a change happen with these digital things, somebody's already in it in your industry, that means you're already trying to catch up. So what we recommend is start thinking about this. Even if you're not ready to invest yet, start thinking about what you might do. And then maybe choose the nice visible kinds of projects to get you started.
So that brings up a question that I think probably a lot of people in the audience have, which is, how do I manage for this kind of digital transformation? You mentioned that a lot of companies are really struggling to get transformative impact, though, from these new technologies. Can we talk a bit about how do you manage for transformation? Are there some steps that you have found companies that do this well are all doing?
This is the big difference between the companies that are just doing technology initiatives and the companies that are leading a technology-based transformation. And the difference is, how are they putting the leadership frameworks in place? So this idea that 1,000 flowers will bloom and we will all be okay is a great way to get some ideas, but we have not seen any transformations that happen bottom up. They're all being driven top down. So what does it take to drive them top down? We're seeing 3 elements. Number 1 is a vision for how you will be different because this technology is here. And I'll give some examples in a minute. The other is then a governance framework to make sure that everybody's moving in the right direction, and engagement with your company to help them build out that vision more and more. You put those three together, that's when transformation takes place.
I'm intrigued that a paint company is on your list of companies that are digitally transforming themselves. Can you tell us a little bit about Asian Paint and what it did? And
Yeah. Isn't it fascinating? Paints, right? This company makes white paint. That's what they're in the business of doing. Now, there are all kinds of good paints. They're good paints, right? But they make paint. And they've always just shipped paint to retailers. And that was their business. Many regions in India, not really talking to each other all that much. And about 10 years ago, they said, we really need to be a more unified company here. And technology was happening, skills were happening to make that possible.
so they were very decentralized, you mean? What do
Very
you mean by
decentralized.
unified?
You had each region had its own manufacturing and distribution capabilities, and they talked to the retail stores in those areas. They didn't really talk much to headquarters at all. When the company decided they needed to be, the top of the company decided they needed to be more unified, it was really hard. They had to put a system in, an ERP system, to get a view on what's happening. They put a call center in because they said, rather than having our salespeople take orders, why not have people call into the call center and do the orders there? They get uniform level of service that way. And then they had to go on from there. Okay, so they got better knowledge, they've got a call center. What else can we do? That's when they retrained their salespeople to say, well, you're not about taking orders anymore, you're about growing this relationship. And they had to work with their people. They gave them mobile technology to help. From there, they did more. And they started saying, we don't have to ship to retail stores. Why not ship right to the construction sites or to the houses? They ship over there, everybody's happier, and they get to see a customer that they never got to see before. And they went on beyond there. What can we do about our supply chain planning and these other things because we have all this knowledge here? They're building automated factories because they scale better and they've got higher quality and some other things. You wouldn't expect that in India. And they're going on and on. They're expanding new countries and everything.
Where's the digital transformation in that example? I mean, of taking a unified company and saying, well, digitally we can transform ourselves through the ERP. But I guess so they built up this stuff. Now, where do these the mobile, the social, and the analytics start to come into play for them now that they've got that base in place?
So every step of the way was a step in transformation, and they never would have predicted 10 years ago they've done everything they've done now. They started with one step: unify the company. Changing their basic business model. They then added, they said, well, now that we got unified, what do we do with the salespeople? Oh, let's give them some mobile technology, make them a relationship manager instead. We can do that. Let's try some stuff with social media. Well, some works, some doesn't in India right now. Analytics, okay, now let's invest in analytics. Can we figure out what regions are doing better? Can we plan our capacity better? Every step of the way, they just say, okay, now that we have that, what else can we do? And over the course, the transformation gets bigger and bigger.
And was this all one happy family all the way through?
These things are never easy for companies to do. And they had all the issues that you'd have in going from a local, geographically diversified place into one unified company. Then, of course, with the salespeople, the same way. We're going to change your skills. How can we help you get there? Right? And then they had to build some skills for do some other things. So every step of the way was hard, but that's what top leaders do. They take on these hard challenges. You got, if you're going to make change happen.
And it sounds like they also sort of did it step by step. They didn't sort of jump in, and you kind of made this point earlier where you want to have a vision, but you need to not, it sounds like, have a roadmap or you're not doing this on MapQuest or Google Maps. Right. You've got to have the ability to be flexible. Is that?
Yeah, so the possibilities change so fast that if you've got a 5 or a 7 year plan, it's very likely within a year you're going to need to replan it. But in addition to that, you want to engage the company in it. So remember I said you've got a vision and you got governance and you got engagement? These companies, the companies that are doing it well, they've set up the vision, they've got the governance to make sure people are not, to put the rules in place, and yet they also are engaging the company in figuring out how do we extend this vision? What do we do more?
You've talked about this idea of digital units. Tell us more about that.
So when headquarters says they're going to build staff and power and control there, the field tends to get nervous sometimes. And yet we are seeing these digital units become valuable in some companies. And why is that? Because over and over again, we see companies that have been invested in really interesting digital stuff, and yet they need to get control. Sometimes steering committee meetings, sometimes these digital czars just aren't enough. So what the digital unit does for you is it allows you to build up skills that the rest of the company doesn't have. And maybe you can use those in mobile, in analytics, in social media. And you can build the skills so the rest of the company doesn't need to.
So it's almost like a service bureau in effect.
Almost a service bureau. And they also don't always have the best reputation inside companies. And so building this unit up, it needs to be built in the way that it's going to be as fast as the company needs to move. And it's going to be about enabling as much as it is about coordinating.
What kinds of hard work does it take to get the field to accept this new layer or this new unit that you're recommending could be useful to build?
So this idea of having the coordination in it takes different forms in different places. Starbucks, for example, for all the interesting stuff they've done with digital, just hired a chief digital officer, this idea of a digital
March,
czar.
yeah.
And the idea there is that he's going to help put some coordination across. We saw this at some other companies too, this idea of coordination being needed. And so I think about two insurance companies. One insurance company did this through a committee structure. They said, listen, we're going to take the top executives in the company, we're going to have them meet on a regular basis, and digital is part of the regular operating discussions they have. And new digital technologies, they'll have another committee that will provide information in. And yet another insurance company took a different role and they built a digital unit. And they've had to do a lot of, in what they do to convince the field that having a digital unit is okay. And the digital unit has had to do a lot to roll out new skills and new capabilities fast so that the field realizes the value of having that unit there.
And is that the key? Once that happens, does the field say, okay, we're on board with this? Or
Well, I don't know that the negotiation ever completely goes away. So you need a lot of top-down in either ways to put the coordination in there and make sure it sticks. But I think you choose the mechanism that's best for the culture you've got.
So it's not a radical transformation, it's a gradual transformation.
It depends how you define on radical. Going from a regional company into a unified company, that's pretty radical.
Okay.
And so each step of the way you do the pieces. And of course, looking back, it's very radical, but each step may be more and more radical in the way.
You're talking here about building the digital unit. What does that mean? How does it fold out?
We talked a little bit earlier that companies in general often will start this thing and then learn that they need to get better coordination among them. And whether they do that with steering committee meetings or with this idea of a digital czar or whatever, some people are building up this idea of a digital unit. And the digital unit allows you to not only to coordinate better, but it also allows you to put some resources in place to build skills that nobody else has. And when you can do that, then you're able to help move everything forward in a more coordinated way. This unit also tends to create kind of that digital platform. So, and the idea is that if you can create the basic foundation that everything rests on, then different business units, different localities can kind of customize a little bit for their need. But you still have all the efficiencies, all the information integration of having one way of looking at things.
So I think this would be a good point to talk about the kind of structures that companies need to manage digital transformation. I know governance is important to what you're looking at in this study. What do you mean by governance, and what does it mean for companies?
So governance can be a dirty word, right?
Yeah.
Well, some people think of the word governance as corporate governance, shareholder issues. Other people think about it in terms of what the auditor is asking you about. The IT people tend to talk about it about how decisions are being made inside IT. The digital governance is a little closer to that IT side of things. It's really saying, how are we going to make sure that everything we do is pushing us in the direction of making that vision happen and not pushing us in the wrong directions. So let me give you an example of how this all fits together. The French Yellow Pages, Pajon, they are the market leader in Yellow Pages in France. Unfortunately, it's a market you don't want to be in.
I was going to say Yellow Pages aren't very exciting
Exactly.
here.
When's the last time you touched the Yellow Pages, right? They were losing 10% of their market every year. So although they were the industry leader, they weren't getting anywhere. So they had to set up a new vision for what they are. And they said, listen, we don't really publish books. What we do is we link small businesses to local customers. The technology we have is a book, but it doesn't have to be. So as they reestablished the vision, they could link you through, they can help you through web pages, they can help you through digital marketing. They even have a cool app, so if you're walking down the street in Paris, you can find out where the dry cleaner is.
And it's on your, this should
It's
be
on
on
your
your mobile
phone.
device now.
Right.
Yeah.
So what they did is they set up this vision that we're going to connect small businesses to local customers, and we're going to do it in digital, and we will be a certain % digital within 4 years. And then from that vision, they started to flesh it out. They started asking for ideas, and they used good, strong decision making to make sure they were moving in the right way.
What about sort of internal structures? Did they do this all with just the people they had in place, or the existing kind of departments, or did they have to kind of reestablish a way of being a more digital business?
It really depends on what you're trying to do and what the culture of your company is. In the case of Pajon, it was such a transformation to their whole company. There was a burning platform. So there, they didn't need to set up a separate digital division. They were going digital. Now, they still had to find a way to manage the ongoing business, even as it was shrinking. And so what they did is they retrained all of their people to be digital salespeople, not phone book salespeople. They then, in their technology department, split the duties between what the digital department was going to do and what the legacy IT department was going to do. They still talk hand in glove. They work really, really closely together, but they could have a little bit of focus working in there. And then over and over again, from the top of the company, we are going to become the digital company. How are we doing on it? What ideas do you have? How can we move forward?
So you mentioned in the study that a company might want to consider creating a digital czar. Who would this person be, and would they perhaps already be in the company?
They might be in the company, they might be outside, but their purpose is the important part here. Big companies are really good at doing things in their units, and they're really not so good at doing things across units, because that's a lot harder. And what we've seen over and over again is every time a company gets good at digital, they put a czar in to start coordinating. So Nike, amazing customer experience work with their social media stuff. Custom design of shoes and apparel that you can do online. Digital design work internally with their designers and their customer service and their supply chain. And yet they still created a digital division to help coordinate across. And that digital division helps them coordinate between them so they can learn from each other. It also allows them to launch these digital products like the watches and the shoes that couldn't have been launched from inside any one unit because it requires talking across them. So that's what the digital czar does, is they coordinate the digital efforts across.
And it seems like you just would run into almost a management nightmare when you're trying to bring in another almost layer there. But you're saying this works. Are there things that they did at Nike to kind of make sure that it worked, or is it really just happened to? Does it actually kind of fall into place naturally and make itself clearly useful?
Well, the last thing in a diversified company that the business units want is to have more stuff at headquarters. Yeah. And people can question it, they can challenge it, these kinds of things. So how do these people work? One thing they do is they tend to build up skills that nobody else has in mobile, in online marketing, in digital marketing, in social media, skills that are not available anywhere else. And so this unit can provide them in the companies that we studied. Another thing they do is they really try to work on excellence fast. So people find that they might deliver things they might not have gotten from headquarters before. And then the last is often you need some top-down leadership to say, just, this is happening, play along with the game.
So that structure worked well for Nike, which has a certain kind of leadership.
Nike and Prisa and many other companies. It's a common pattern we're seeing across.
Yeah, but they're a very aggressive kind of company, and not every company wants to adopt technology in that kind of fashion or be so aggressive. What about different kinds of companies that have a different sort of management philosophy around technology? Do you have to be a certain kind of company to be able to get the benefits of digital transformation?
No, certainly you can do it within different business units. Certainly you can do it within certain functions within your business. What we do see over time, though, is that people feel that as they start making progress with these technologies, as they start building skills and doing investments, they need better coordination. So we typically see people move out of the many units doing their own thing into some coordinated approach, whether that's through kind of steering committee meetings that just manage this approach, whether it's through these czars that communicate but they don't have resources, or whether it's through a digital unit kind of thing. It's all in the goal of saying, we've got pockets of excellence here, what can we do to put them together? Or the opposite, we have no excellence here whatsoever, how can we build it so everybody can grow on it?
If you were to just put this in a few words for our viewers, what kind of recommendation would you say companies should take and kind of how to go forward with this?
So the big thing is technology change is happening so rapidly that every industry is being affected by this. So if you're an executive leading a company, looking at these technologies, you need to lead the technology. Don't let it lead you. You want to think about how is your company going to be different because this is here? And then put in the framework so you're not just providing technology, you're actually pushing your company forward in a different way because the technology is there.
So George, I know this is phase one of the work you've been doing. What's next?
So we have just collected a survey information from more than 400 people in large companies to try to understand, here's what we thought was going on in here, is it really true? And the good news is it really is true. The people that we call digerati are really performing better. This role of having the governance and the engagement as the big driver of transformation. It's more about this how that you drive change than it is about the technology that you invest in. That's coming out too. So we're in the process of writing that up now, and then we'll keep doing more case studies and more reports and more things in the coming year.
Great. It's been really interesting listening to you talk about what you're doing, and we're looking forward to hearing more from the Center for Digital Business. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Michael.
This is Michael Fitzgerald for MIT Sloan Management Review. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again.